Everyone ready to go? Well, I think maybe thank you for that, Matt. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. Hope everybody had a good long weekend. It is Tuesday, May 23rd. Welcome to the council regular meeting, the City of Lacombe. It is 5:30 and I'll call the meeting to order. Everybody's had an opportunity to review agendas with respect to the consent agenda. Any input there? Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I would like to pull out the report from the trade shows or Coffee with Council. My agenda's not up yet. I think that's what it's called.
Very good. Anyone else? CAO Gowdy.
I was hoping to pull the CAO report to add an item there.
Very good. Anyone else? Chief Gowdy, that was everything? Okay.
Oh,
We have a motion, then Councillor Hoekstra, go ahead.
I move to accept the consent agenda as amended.
Thank you. And please go ahead and vote when it's up in your machines. Expect that will be unanimous. Thanks, everyone. And then for the overall agenda, are there any items that we need to consider for moving around or adding? If there are none, we could use a motion to move forward. Councillor Dallas.
Thank you. Motion to accept the agenda as amended.
Thank you. Please go ahead and vote. And that is unanimous as well. Thank you. Chief Gowdy, you wanted your report removed. We'll deal with that one first, please.
thank you. Yes, I wanted to add a planning and development item with respect to the Lacombe Downtown Heart. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Thompson.
Thanks, CEO Gowdy. The Community Planning Association of Alberta has awarded Lacombe the Community Planning Achievement Award. And this award is intended to recognize, celebrate, and share the success of hard work of an individual or team or organization whose creative ideas and work have positively contributed to community building and well-being anywhere in Alberta. The Heart of Lacombe, as Council is well aware, is spearheaded by the Downtown Area Redevelopment Committee. It is a brand that is meant to inspire tourism, residential and commercial development, helping to build the modern identity for residents and business owners. I just want to thank the Community Planning Association of Alberta for recognizing this achievement, and congratulations to Council, the DARP Committee, and the City staff on this award.
Wonderful, thank you. And it looks like you've got a plaque here with the award to show everyone as well. Nice. Put that one up so that everybody at home can see it. I don't know if they can see it or not, but. And additionally, Councillor Hoekstra, you had an item from the Spring Coffee with Council engagement sessions.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that there's a comment in here that says Lacombe recently received confirmation from the province that Lacombe will receive curbside recycling services under the new EPR program. I guess I missed, had we been told that other than here? Okay, I just missed it.
I believe so, but I can go back and see where that is.
I just thought it was a great way to let us know. If, just again, it's those tests. Are you reading your package?
Not to temper your enthusiasm, but let's keep in mind that's a curbside pickup system. It's not necessarily recycling as we would prefer to think of recycling,
Thank you, Mayor.
but still positive nonetheless. And I think that obviously the work, the advocacy that we did to suggest that all communities be treated equal was a worthwhile one. So to start off, Councillor Hibbs, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Sorry, just because it was already brought out, I just feel that I would just comment. There was one here that said a resident would like to see accessible parking spots downtown receiving more attention in the winter with extra attention to conditions around curb access. And then the response is saying that they would love to follow up with that resident. Unfortunately, I can't remember the resident, but I remember the conversation very well. So if I can be a little bit of a resource in that, we can maybe connect after.
And for our regular agenda, the first item up then is our open forum. And today we have an issue pertaining to fence encroachment. And online we have joining us Danielle Davies. Is Darren with you as well, Danielle, or are you handling this yourself?
Hi there. Can everyone hear me?
Very good, you bet.
Okay. I am not sure if he's joining or not. He's working in California right now. He said he would try to join if he can. So I'm not sure if he's on here. We're not in the same location at the moment. I guess I'll just speak on our behalf. So good evening to City Council members. On behalf of my family and I, my name is Danielle Davies. I'm just here to address a request for a fence variance, specifically the west side of our corner lot located at 5466 52 Avenue in Lacombe. We've owned this property for a total of 18 years, and we pay almost $8,000 a year in property taxes. And nearly 6 years ago, we greatly improved the property by demolishing the old house on the lot and then building a brand new single family home and a detached garage in the back, and then a new fence, and had the yard professionally landscaped. So that was over 6 years ago now. And at the time, there was no house on the property north of us. There was no property stake that we could find on the west side, but there was one remaining fence post on that north lot. So we used that as a guide to build our fence. There's no utility right of way on the outside of our fence. There's no sightline issue or disruption to neighbors or traffic that we know of. And we are the last corner lot at a T intersection, so a dead end road. Just in the fall, though, we received a letter from the development officer saying that our fence encroaches on city land and a road right of way. So we do have 10.5 feet. I did send some pictures in showing from the outside of our fence to the inside of the curb. There is 10.5 feet there, but the letter says that we are over the property line by over 3 feet. Now it makes sense to me with the road allowances that the setback should be the same for the whole street, but the 4 houses in that block on those corners have all varying amounts. So now that north lot does have a new development of a brand new duplex with a fence there, and that only allows an extra 12 inches of space more than ours. And then the lot directly west of us actually has 5 feet less space than what ours does. So we're not negating that we do encroach city land. We realize that according to the RPR, we take responsibility for that. I guess we're just requesting an approval of a variance or some kind of license to occupy so that so that we don't have to remove our entire fence on that side and move it over, and that we would incur the cost if the road needs to be widened in the future, or future owners would have to incur that cost. So some sort of agreement. I guess we're just hoping for that instead of removing our entire fence. It's been there for almost 6 years now. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to answer those. I'm sorry I can't be there in person.
Thank you, Danielle. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we do have a couple minutes left on your time allotment. So if there are any questions from any council members, certainly now would be the time to field them. As I'm sure you're aware that the city deals with encroachment issues on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
It's unfortunate when things take as long to come to fruition as they have. And I understand that you said this has been 6 or 7 years.
Well,
since-
almost 6 years. Yeah. Almost
6 years?
6, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
There has been some correspondence back and forth, and I can't help but think there isn't some methodology in place where we could acknowledge that in fact it is city land. However, you have occupied it and looked after it, which is certainly preferable to the alternative. However, if there is a time when the city does require the property for utilities or road expansion,
Mhm.
which quite frankly, I expect to be not any time in the near future, that your fence will have to be moved because it is on city property at your
Right.
expense. Until
Mhm.
that time, though, for myself, I think that we need to come up with some document that allows it to stay where it is. But that's for council to decide in any event.
Right.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Thank you, Danielle, for your
Oh, you're
presentation.
welcome. Thank you.
Just to clarify, though, I gather your house has been there for 6 years, but the fence came up. You built it somewhat later, right? So it has not been there for the full 6 years.
Well, pretty much. Well, actually, it might have been the next summer maybe that we built it. So we'll be there 6 years this September, and then the fence would have been probably almost 5 years, I guess. I'd have to look back, but it was pretty quickly after. I might
Thank
be
you.
wrong with that. Yeah, you're welcome.
Councillor Hibbs? In case you're wondering what that was, your 5 minutes is now up.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much again for the opportunity to present.
Not a problem. We do have one more question for you.
Sure.
At least anyway, Councillor Hibbs?
It's just a quick one. I'm just
Sure.
curious as to why MPC wasn't the avenue chosen for this rather than presenting to council.
I am not sure. I guess I was given this as a suggestion as to what to do next. I think I did go talk to the development officer, Beth, and she told me it wasn't really an MPC issue. So unless I misunderstood that, I don't know. So I was advised to come here. Yeah.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Just to process then, so will this come back to council then for a motion for that variance, or how does that work going forward?
CEO Gotti?
So as it stands right now, the city does have a direction to remedy out on the property that expires, I believe, May 31st for this fence to be removed. So we would be looking for potentially some direction this evening if you're looking to provide a variance of that type. I should maybe, to your previous question, Councillor Hibbs, it actually is not a variance. That's why it wouldn't come to MPC. A variance would be some relaxation of a building standard. This is actually occupation of public land, and so that's not an MPC variance to be approved. That would be a council decision.
Thank you for that clarification. We appreciate it. Councillor Gullickson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. That was my question also, procedure. So what you're looking for then is a motion tonight to clarify that. Thank you.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Yeah, I'm just trying to think how to word that. Ideally, I'd love for it to come back. Is there a way we can make a motion to delay the work order and then we can bring it back to council for more discussion? Okay, I'm prepared to make that motion and that we delay the work. What did you call it? Work remedy?
An order to remedy.
Thank you. I would make that motion to delay the order to remedy for the property in question at 5466 52nd Ave, and that further direction come forth later to council to address this. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So we'll just give IT a moment to formulate that motion for you to vote on. Does anyone have any additional questions or require any clarification on this item in general while that is occurring? Councillor Connick.
And just further that, I just, as the presenters alluded to, there are a number of other properties that there seems to be some perhaps encroachment as well. So I'd like for us or men to look at those in conjunction and see if there's a number of them that need to be addressed. Thank you.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Question for the presenter regarding, was this built by a professional contractor?
We had like the fence itself, you mean? We had
Yes.
the posts put in by DB Bobcat. They drilled those and put the posts in, and then we did build the rest of it ourselves, like the boards in between. But we did mark, like based on that other fence that was there at the previous property, kind of where to put those. So that's kind of what we used as a guide, like that the lot north of us that had been demolished, there was still the fence post there on that very southwest corner. So we used that as a guide for our property line on that west side.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So seeing no more input, I will call the question. I believe it's there for you to vote on, so please do so now. So that is voted unanimously in favor to delay the order to remedy. And to the proponent, I'm sure that administration will be in contact with you and advise you of any further steps.
Okay, thank you again, City Council, for your time. I appreciate this. Thank you. Is there anything else you need from me, or that's the end for me?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Have
Appreciate
a great night. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So as I reached over to hit the clock, I hit this wristband on here, and I just wanted to let everybody know I'm wearing a Celebrating Community Disability Professionals bracelet, which we were happy to acknowledge, both Councillor Hoekstra and myself today at the Action Group. We don't do proclamations. However, we do appreciate the fine work that people do in our community, and this is a terrific example of a bunch of concerned individuals who put forth great effort in making our community such a great place to live, and we thank them for it. Ms. Malabono.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I just wanted to know if we could go back to the agenda items that we pulled off the consent for motions to accept I believe the 2023 spring coffee with council engagement summary as information, and that council accept the CAO report as information.
Very good. Thank you for that reminder. Council, could I have motions on either one of those? Councillor Gullickson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move the CAO report be accepted as information.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion on that item? Please go ahead and vote then. I expect, there we go. Unanimously in favor. And for the last item, the motion as well, please. Councillor Hoekstra, go ahead.
Thank you. I move that we accept the spring coffee with council engagement sessions report as information.
Thank you. We're all good on that item. Please go ahead and vote. And that is voted unanimously in favor as well. So on our agenda, item number 4, we are delighted to have our Member of Parliament here with us this evening to discuss some areas of mutual interest. MP Calkins, you've been here many times before. Thank you for attending this evening. If there's a particular format that you want to do, if you want to start out and say a few words, perhaps there's some questions to field afterwards. It's up to you. So the floor is yours whenever you'd like.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. It's great to be back in this council chambers. I've spent a bit of time here before. Seems like a long, long time ago. I do have the document that was sent to my office of issues to discuss. So I think maybe what I'll do is rather than try to anticipate what's on people's minds here in the broader scale of what's happening in Ottawa, I'll just wait for you guys to ask me questions if you've got specific questions or concerns about that, and see if I can do my best to address these items of concern that were asked of me. So housing affordability and affordable housing. So the first item here is what is causing the affordability crisis that we're seeing recently. So I've got a few notes here, but just by and large, we're not really seeing it as badly in Alberta, believe it or not. Things are not as bad in Alberta as they seem to be in some of the other parts of the country. In the last, well, I guess the line that's used is in the last 7 or 8 years, the amount that's needed to buy a house for a down payment in Canada has doubled. The amount that's needed for rent of a 1-bedroom apartment has essentially doubled, and in some places it's even tripled. So we're talking about upwards of $3,000 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment in places like Vancouver and Toronto. Houses are now not being rented out as houses, but you can rent a room as a family in that house and then share the common area. This is seeming to be a growing trend in some of our larger urban centers. And of course, the amount of a mortgage payment has gone up. The inflationary pressure that has been placed on not only Canada's economy, but in most cases everywhere else in the world, was fueled by increases in a massive outpouring of money into the economy during COVID. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but Canada's national debt increased by, in those 2 years, by over $400 billion. That's money that the government basically generated and put into the economy to replace regular economic activity. And that inflation has in turn created an upward pressure on interest rates that we haven't seen for quite some time, which of course is now another barrier to getting into the marketplace. In order to cool down the economy and the inflation, higher interest rates, people are less willing to borrow the money that it takes to build a house or build a building, build a condominium, whatever the case might be. So what's causing this? So Canada has had a traditionally around a 200,000 to 300,000 persons per year increase in immigration. We haven't even kept up to the housing supply when that was the immigration rate. And I'm not blaming specifically immigration. I'm just saying broadly there's a number of things. So I've talked about the inflationary pressures, the pressures on supply chains to drive up the cost of everything. But we've also got so many more people coming to Canada than we've ever had before. And that's why we don't see it necessarily in all parts of Canada, because there's a lot of pressure in certain markets for that to happen. So where are people coming to? Well, we've had several, I'm not sure what the total number is, but we had 40,000 people a year crossing at Roxham Road for the last 7 or 8 years. That's put a lot of pressure into the Montreal and Quebec region. We've seen the same thing happen in Toronto, where the government was housing tens of thousands of people, but it's just they've opened up the floodgates. So imagine turning on one tap of hot water to bring a bunch of people in, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, But if you don't turn on the cold water, which is to even things out, so if we're not building the housing for them, where are they going to live? Simply put, where are they going to live? And that's why we're seeing a lot of that upward pressure. So the demand for housing, I think Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, I think globally, it has seen higher prices. It's harder to get a house built in some of those communities than it is to buy a house in New York City, for example, or London, UK, which sounds absurd when you think about it. And in some cases, some of these, and my leader talks about this quite a bit, talks about some of the issues about getting a permit. Some of these municipalities, the cost of even just getting through the permitting process is tens of thousands of dollars. I don't think that's a problem here, which is why we don't have, if you want to build a house in Lacombe, pretty easy to do so. You want to build a house in Red Deer, it's pretty easy to do so. Other parts of the country, it's not easy to do so. So that's another area of concern. And so what are we going to do? So what we propose and what we've been pressuring the government to do and the Bank of Canada is to go back to its job of maintaining inflation at a rate of around 2%, which is why we have seen an increase in the interest rates. We've typically, in the past, depending on what government's been in power, whatever the government of the day happens to be, I know that when we had economic issues to resolve, we invested in physical infrastructure more than social infrastructure on a comparative scale to what the current government is doing. So we're spending a lot of money, but we're actually not, that money is just money going to people for the sake of going to people. I voted numerous times to do things like give people a $500 or $1,000 check for rent to try and help them. Like, these are the one-off solutions that the government of the day is now proposing to remedy these chronic issues that we're having in our municipality. So we've done that numerous times. The budget just, I think, had a grocery rebate of $200 and some as well. So these are the kind of ad hoc things that the government continues to put money in. When you multiply and factor that out, it's actually hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. So the budget that just came out is, again, billions and billions of dollars more, $60 billion more spending than the government's actually taking in revenue. So that's what's causing the inflation. We would, of course, get back to a reasonable fiscal anchors, such as linking our debt to GDP ratio and hopefully getting back to a balanced budget. I know Pierre's very keen on that, so we've been pressuring the government to keep to their promises. A few years ago, the current finance minister said that they were going to get back to a debt to GDP ratio, but that line has been obliterated with the most recent budget as well. So that's what's causing the frustrations. What we're recommending the government do is to stop doing what they're doing, because it's causing the problems, but we don't seem to have, we're not seeming to break through in that conversation. So I don't actually expect, Your Worship, I don't expect things to change much on the national level until the makeup of Parliament changes, if I can be so blunt. Lacombe Lodge is a question that you have. The senior population, of course, of the city and the county, the catchment area has basically quadrupled in the last 50 years, which obviously puts a strain on the demand and services. My understanding is that Parkwood Manor and Lacombe County are between 49 and 56 years old. So the typical lifespan of a building is about 50 years. So we're at or beyond. So if I'm telling you things that you already know, I apologize. Obviously, it would be a priority, I think, for the community to have a revamped or a modern lodge with more capacity. I don't think the demographics are going to change much for the next little while, so we're going to need to be able to achieve that. So I'll let you guys are the best ones positioned to know where something should be built and what should be built here in the community. The only advice I have for you is, of course, if you do make a decision, or if there's somebody, a developer that wants to work on something, I would be happy to lend my support, my political support, whatever that looks like, for the application of grants. As you know, during COVID, there was a number of absolute horror stories about what happened with people that were living in long-term care facilities. Some of them were abandoned, and the military had to be called in to actually help some of these folks. So in response, and rightly so, the government has created a safe long-term care fund agreement with the various provinces. Alberta will be receiving, I believe, $115 million from this fund as per the 2022 agreement. And there will be an opportunity to apply for that money through, I believe the province will be the administrator of that program. So that might be a source of some of the revenue that any project for a new lodge could have access to. Prairie Economic Development Canada supports funding initiatives that foster economic growth and diversity. I don't think that fund is going to be one, but here's the thing. When you are building a project, there's usually a bunch of smaller, everybody knows that a large project has a bunch of smaller projects within it. And sometimes those smaller projects, whether it's getting an elevator or something put in a building, you can apply for New Horizons for seniors money. You can start applying for a number of smaller grants from these various agencies that will actually help you might get 3 or 4 different grants to help with various projects within the overall project, if you follow me. So I would look at the Prairie Economic Development Canada Fund. That one is probably something that you could leverage a little bit of money out, but it's not going to be a huge amount of money. The Green Municipal Fund, I'm sure you're aware of. So if you have a green project, I mean, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, I think, administers that. But it might not be of a large enough scale to be useful. And there's a recommissioning grant that provides funding for local community buildings. I don't know if the lodge would qualify for that, but again, that's just a small amount of money that you could apply for, but every little bit helps. And of course, Infrastructure Canada provides Canada Community Building Fund, so that's the other major large fund. So that would be an area that you could, any proprietor or any proposal could apply for the funding there. So if you need more clarification on those things, I'll be happy to get it to you in writing. So until I know more about specifically, and I apologize if I haven't done my due diligence, what your plans are, there is going to be some federal funding, obviously partnerships with the province as well, and leveraging funding to build a large project like that is probably how it's going to happen. So any help any support, I'll let you guys take the lead on it. Any support that I can offer, you'll have it. I saw you turned your microphone on, so I
just didn't realize it was off.
Pardon me. Okay, inflation and the cost of living, item 2. Do you guys want to talk about item 1 before I move on to item 2? Does anybody want to ask me any questions? Okay. Inflation and the cost of living on average, you've got your questions there. So yeah, the 6.9%. Look, I'm just going to be honest with you. Albertans have been the hardest hit. Albertans and Saskatchewanians, I would argue, have been the hardest hit with the policies, the federal policies of the day. Ralph Klein coined the term the Alberta Advantage, I think, back a number of years ago. And of course, it was good government services and, of course, letting our economy grow, especially when it comes to our non-renewable resources. Of course, we're very much hemmed in and hampered right now with the closure of all but one LNG proposal that's still under construction right now in Kitimat. There is only one pipeline project that is going to Tidewater, and that is the Trans Mountain. It used to be the Kinder Morgan pipeline, and the costs of that are skyrocketing well beyond $30 billion. That was an $8 billion project that's now well in excess of $30 billion, and my understanding is they'll be coming back to the Government of Canada for more money on that. Look, at certain points in time in our history here in Alberta, non-renewable resources accounted for over 25% of the provincial revenue. And at other times in recent history, that number has gotten down into single digits, depending on who the government of the day is federally and provincially. So our advantage here in Alberta is our resources and our people. And we had the people to get the resources out of the ground and to the market. And we were very, very good at it. We still are very good at it. But until we recognize the value of that at the national level, again, I don't think that those numbers are going to be back where they are. So, give you an example. Somebody who is, I'll give you an example. I worked 3 months as a roughneck in 1997. Yep, 3 months. In 3 months working as a roughneck, I had enough money for a down payment on my first house. 3 months. Right now, my son works for an oil field service company, and I mean, he's making more money than I made back then on an hourly rate. But the amount that he's able to keep, it just doesn't seem possible for him to get ahead and just keeping up with the bills that he has when he's living in my house. I'm the guy that's going to have the 35-year-old living in my basement if this doesn't change. And it's frustrating. But it feels like we're all working just as hard as we ever have, if not harder, and not getting ahead. And I think that's the frustrating part. So the taxes have increased across the board on a number of fronts when it comes to individuals. The carbon tax certainly is putting upward pressure on the cost of living. The new fuel standard put in place will add about another, I think, 16 cents a liter to the cost of fuel at the pump. So when it gets to $170 a ton by 2030, and that's only 6.5 years away, if that plan goes to its fruition, then the cost of a liter of fuel will have artificially increased in Canada by over 60 cents a liter, just in that carbon tax and the fuel standards alone. So, yeah, we just need to get back to the things that we know used to work, which was use the resources that we have, let the people that are skilled at doing the things that they need to do, go do the work that they need to do, and create a tax system that rewards hard work and values hard work, and we will have ambitious people will step out of the woodwork again and get back to work. But and this is another point that I wanted to get to in the housing conversation. There is an inordinate amount of large investors that are buying up large amounts of property as well. I forgot to mention that. And my sense is, if you are the kind of person that has millions of dollars to spend, would you invest in a pipeline project in Canada right now? Would you invest in an oil and gas company in Canada right now? Would you invest in any of the traditional things that people used to invest in? Probably not. So if that's been your traditional world of investing and you don't want to invest in that world anymore, where are you going to invest? Real estate. And of course, that drives up the pressure on the prices and costs as well. And I think there's a lot of money just parked in real estate that's not being used right now. And I think various municipalities are tackling that issue in a different way as well. So to get back to the Alberta Advantage, I would argue is going to take it's going to require the same solution that housing required. Is it a change in makeup of our current parliament? Last question that you have here is medical assistance in dying legislation, referred to as MAID. So this is the fallout of a court case that happened back when Stephen Harper was still the Prime Minister, and that decision struck down the constitutional provisions and left Parliament with a timeline to deal with medical assistance in dying. The first iteration of the bill, as you're likely aware, made it so that only somebody who was doing it of their own recognizance and fully capable of indicating their wishes, had been diagnosed with a terminal illness with no chance of recovery, and there was no foreseeable hope that they would ever get better, and they were going to die in the near future of their ailments. That was the first iteration of the bill. That was then struck down by I'll call it a mid-level court. I think it was just the first, it was a traffic court, but the next one up and then the appeal court in Quebec. So this is a decision from a single judge in Quebec, which by the way has a different judicial system than the rest of Canada insofar as their legal system. But anyway, struck down that provision saying that MAID had to be more accessible. And then the government, through its, it set up a parliamentary committee, it set up the public committee, then decided that it was going to table legislation. I believe it was, I can't remember, it was C7. It seems to strike what I remember about it as far as the numbers are concerned. But it was actually, it went so far as to allow somebody just who is depressed to seek medical assistance in dying. And I just want you to know, so that actually got debated for a while, and we ended up passing, I think, Bill C-39 instead, which delayed that implementation for another year. So that we're not there yet, but I think we're coming up on the anniversary of that date here in the not too distant future. So I just want to give you the numbers. Medical assistance in dying, I think, was implemented in 2016. The first full year was 2016. 1,000 Canadians under the regime that we talked about requested and received medical assistance in ending their lives. The number in 2021 was just under 32,000 Canadians ended their lives with medical assistance in dying. This has actually put a strain on our healthcare system because, of course, it's healthcare practitioners that are delivering this service, and there are procedures and processes put in place by every provincial healthcare authority on how someone goes about doing that. But the numbers, I think, are alarming, and various groups, disability groups, mental health organizations have been advocating that we don't expand this any further. We need to have some we need to have guardrails on this because it seems to be going off the rails a little bit. So this is putting us, like I said, it puts a strain on our healthcare resources, and you know, we're seeing, I think, very rare anecdotal requests. I haven't heard anything here in central Alberta, but there have been requests, even like food bank volunteers, people coming there. You know, we're seeing food bank uses on the rise. It's certainly happening here in central Alberta, I can tell you. But I haven't heard of any requests here. But food bank volunteers are being approached by people who are now chronically using food banks for food, who are so depressed that they're asking, how do I apply for MAID? To a food bank volunteer. So, like I said, that's anecdotal. I don't think it's a chronic problem, but it tells you it's an insight into where we're at in the economy in certain parts of the country, at least. So that is, if there's anything that you need for resources on that, I don't know why medical assistance in dying would be a burden for the municipality. So if you want to let me know why that would be a problem, I'd be all ears. And I hope that addresses the concerns that you have. And if you want to question, get some more information or some more thoughts on this or any of the other issues that are going on in Ottawa, today was a fairly big day, actually, of information coming out of Ottawa. But if you got any questions for me, Your Worship, I'd be happy to address them the best I can. Thank you for inviting me, and always a pleasure.
Wonderful. Well, we appreciate you being here. Just to put that number in perspective for the MAID number, once again, certainly not a municipal item, but a dramatic increase in that short period of time. Can you just put it into context? How many people die per year in Canada? If there's 32,000 requesting MAID.
So the information that I look at is our death rate versus our birth rate plus immigration. So those are the two. So we are a growing population. I'd have to go back and take a look at the numbers.
Okay. No, I just want to make sure that you had
I
your
don't
notes.
have
That's
it
fine.
right off the top of mind. But suffice to say that our death rate has increased.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Thank you very much for presenting to us tonight. I really appreciate it. Quick question on affordability for housing. Is your party addressing the homeless crisis in some areas? I know in our community here, we have some homeless people. It's not as visible as in other areas, but it certainly is an issue for us too. And that housing problem is something that nobody seems to be able to solve. Have you any thoughts on that?
Thanks, Councillor Gullickson. My party's not the governing party. So what we do is we apply pressure on the government to either hold them to account on their promises or to take the ideas that we have. I can say that the government has actually changed a little bit of its direction to emulate what we've been pressing for. So we have a glut of federal buildings that could easily be converted into, where I stay in Ottawa, for example, I stay in a block complex that's got four towers on it. One of them's an apartment tower, the other three are office towers. One of those office towers basically sits there empty. And it's a federal building. And it could easily be renovated, sold and renovated, and converted into condominiums, affordable housing, what have you, in downtown Ottawa, which would ease congestion because it's right close to where everything happens. It would be a sensible thing to do. So there's a lot of those properties that are available. Pierre has been pushing very, very hard on certain municipalities to speed up. Like, I don't understand how we can have the second largest geopolitical landmass in the world and we can't build houses. So it's policies, whether it's a federal policy or a provincial policy or a municipal policy, it's policies that would be in some cases preventing or granting the construction of homes. That's just the bottom line. And in some municipalities, I'm not saying this one, I love where I live and I'm very happy with what you guys are doing. But in some municipalities, it's tens of thousands of dollars to get a building permit. Tens of thousands of dollars. And I'm not talking about skyscraper, I'm talking about a single family dwelling. Tens of that. Could you imagine such a thing? So these are the kinds of things that Pierre is talking about. Obviously, in communities that have large transit systems, why are we not building high density housing near the transit areas for people to use that public transit? So these are some of the things that we're pushing on. Obviously, making life more affordable by reining in spending and making a paycheck more powerful is going to obviously give people more spending power, and they'll be able to afford to buy a home. So we just we don't have a money problem, I don't think, in this country. We just don't have enough stuff for money to buy. And as soon as we start making more homes, getting out of the way and letting that happen, I think we'll be better off. That's a 30,000-foot answer, but I think that's what we need to do. So, and it will work. It's been tested, and economists and people in the know say that this will help. It's not going to solve everything, but it will help. Thank you for the question.
So another item that we didn't go over is the criminal justice system and some of the issues over bail. And it just seems to me that we've got many provinces who seem to have banded together to suggest that we can have some reform in the bail system. However, we have a federal government who appears not willing to do so. Could you offer some insight as to why that is? What is it that is holding this procedure up?
Thank you, Your Worship. So one of the bills that the Government of Canada proposed, several of them, I'll just give you some examples. So the government has done and said a number of things. Bill C-75 was one of their major bills that they did when they had a majority government in their first term, that codified into the criminal code principle of restraint. The principle of restraint in the justice system means that you grant bail as early as possible with the least amount of restrictions as possible. So that wasn't codified in the criminal code until Bill C-75 received royal assent. We warned the government of the day that if you do this, people will be out on bail and so on. So here we are a number of years later, and if you've watched the violent crime trends in Canada, it has gone up. There was a bit of a leveling off during COVID, simply because everybody was home. So that meant property crimes and other types of violent crimes that follow with break and enters and catching people, and those things kind of leveled off. But now that all the mandates have been lifted, pretty much violent crime is on the rise again. So 32% higher violent crime than there was 7 years ago, 94% higher crime when it comes to gang-related homicides and violent crime. Gangs. There's 430 gangs in Canada, according to the RCMP. There's about 7,000 people in total in all of those gangs. They're responsible for 50% of the gun deaths in Canada, if you go back and average it out over the last 5 or 6 years. 2.2 million law-abiding gun owners in Canada were responsible for about 12 homicides a year on average. So a gang member is 3,300 times more likely to commit a homicide with a firearm than a law-abiding firearms owner. As a matter of fact,
I'm sorry, was that 12 or 12%?
no, 12. So out of 2.2 million people in Canada that own guns, about 12 on average a year get charged with, not even convicted necessarily, but they get charged with homicide. Any homicide, doesn't even have to be with a gun, just any homicide. Your average Canadian, not counting the gang member, not counting the 2.2 million gun owners, are 3 times more likely than a gun owner to commit a homicide in Canada. But a gang member is 3,300 times more likely to commit a homicide than say somebody like yourself or me, your worship, somebody who owns a firearm, hunters, farmers, whatever the case might be. But the government, through Bill C-75 and a number of others, pieces of legislation, C-5 and so on, has basically made the case that our correctional facilities need to be proportionally representative. So it's right in their press releases. You can go read it if you want, saying that there's too many Black and Indigenous people in jail. They say it. I'm just repeating their words. These aren't my words. These are their words. So what they've done is they've put in those provisions on the bail. They basically removed minimum penalties for a whole slew of crimes that you would associate with organized crime. Smuggling of weapons, manufacturing drugs, trafficking in weapons, trafficking in drugs. They've increased the maximums on certain gun crimes, but they've got rid of all of the minimums. So you take that and you add that into the bail reform. It basically means that certain areas of our country, certain people are just basically getting, and I'm not talking for property crimes. I'm not talking about theft. I'm not talking about B&Es. I'm talking about violent crime. And we've heard the revolving door. I mean, it's just, you see it out in the rural areas. Councillor Ross, you know what I'm talking about. I put together a report back in 2017 when I'm the chair of the Rural Crime Caucus. And it's just falling on deaf ears, Your Worship. I don't know how to say it any other way. So, in an act of, the only act of actually national unity that I've seen recently, all 10 premiers, regardless of their political strife, all 10 premiers wrote a letter to the government asking for changes in bail. Every police chief, every police organization in this country, we're up to what? 10 dead police officers in the last 8 months? I'm not talking about, I mean, like they were ambushed and killed because they're police officers. So the tone that the government has set, I would argue, Your Worship, and I didn't come here to be partisan or political, but the tone that the government has set is basically said there's no consequences for your actions if you fall into a certain demographic. And we're seeing it manifest itself. And if you don't believe me, go Google right now, Toronto Police Service Most Wanted. Take a look who their most wanted list is in Toronto. And then circle that square with the laws that they passed. It doesn't make any sense at all. So David Lametti, our Justice Minister, did table a bill just before we rose. I think it's Bill C-48, which is what they're proposing as the solution. It does have the support of some organizations in the country, but most of the people that we talk to offline say it doesn't go far enough to address the real concern. So whether it's more to do with mental health and, you know, drug addiction, we have to work on the diversion of folks that go into those problems as well. But the reality is, Your Worship, there are some people who know what they're doing. They're criminals. They're organized crime. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're operating with impunity right now. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to fix this without taking some fairly drastic measures in the future. We'll have to. That's a conversation that the entire nation will have to be a part of, I think. So. Thank goodness we still feel very safe here in Lacombe. Very, very happy to be living here.
Well, that's maybe a positive note to conclude things on, unless anybody has any burning questions for our Member of Parliament. I'm not seeing any. So once again, thank you for the advocacy that you do on behalf of all of us, and we appreciate your time coming to address us here this evening.
My pleasure. I hope to see all of you out and about. Was this at the Fish and Game banquet with Councillor Hoekstra? I don't know why you weren't there, Your Worship, but I know why.
Unfortunately, I was out of the country,
Yeah,
but
understood.
Perhaps I can redeem myself and be here for the grand opening of the accessible dock and at Len Thompson Pond instead.
Fortunately, I won't be here, so if you can say hi to everybody on my behalf,
Be happy to.
I would appreciate that. I'll be in on, I guess it's National Range Day. It's July 3rd. Is that correct? Do I have the date right?
I believe it is.
And I'll be in Ontario that day. So anyway, thank you very much. I hope this was helpful and informative. And if you ever need anything, by all means, reach out. And if I can lend my name or whatever political clout I have to any of the things that you need here in the city, I'm happy to do so.
Wonderful. We will be making the seniors facility an advocacy priority, as we have been to this point, and we'll be calling on you for help in that regard, I expect to.
Happy to help. Keep in mind I'm 55, so let's get on this, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Blaine. So next up, under request for decision, item 6.1, Manager Hackett, if you'd care to make your way up. We've got the Heritage Survey inventory and the POIL update. So after you've had a few moments to organize your materials and whatnot there, just a reminder to use the microphone for the benefit of those watching online and in the gallery. And whenever you're ready to go, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor Creasy, members of council. It's my pleasure to introduce Michael Doherty from M. Doherty Consulting. You may recall he was last here in December, and he's here tonight to present the final report, and then we'll move into the request for decision from there. Thank you.
And that was everything I was going to say as way of introduction. Really grateful to be back here tonight, excited. Feels gratifying to be at the end of a process that I've been through, and really excited for HRC moving this forward. So tonight I'll give a brief presentation on a volume of material that was provided to you, and then we'll have room for question and answer at the end. Just a quick background on heritage management in Lacombe. I actually gave a talk in December on Lacombe's success in heritage management, and it was an online talk, and a bunch of people from Fort Macleod tuned in to try to find out what the secret to success in Lacombe was. So that was really great to see folks from Fort Macleod trying to tap into Lacombe. But it really starts over 50 years ago when the Canadian Heritage Building Survey came and did the initial survey work in 1972. They updated that in 79. Then in 1988, the Main Street program came to Lacombe and heritage work continued. In 97, there was a study of the grain elevators that was done. And then in 2009, the substantive work that was done under HPI, the Historic Places Initiative, included the heritage survey update, then the heritage inventory, and then the management plan, and then ongoing heritage management. And then that brings us to today, where we're updating that work that was done in 2009 to 2013. The work that we did, it came in 2 phases. Scope 1 was the survey update. So we were updating the 2009-2010 survey of 255 sites. We were looking at the places of interest list of 109 sites. We added new 125 sites from the 50-year period. And then we worked on public engagement, which was the report in December. The phase 2 was the evaluation and inventory. So we were looking at inventorying 15 sites. So researching and reviewing and understanding those, and we did a bit of a dive into incentives and what's going on in other municipalities. Methodology and timeline, we started about a year ago with initiation. The field work for survey went from July to November. We had this wonderful long fall, and where the leaves stayed on the trees right up until Halloween, which makes taking photographs of historic places very challenging. So we had this window from just before Halloween till I think November 2nd or 3rd, the snow hit. So went out and did a whole bunch of photography and field work in those couple of days to catch up. Did historic research. Community engagement went from July to November. We presented the What We Heard report in December, and that's when the final reporting for Scope 1 was completed. On that, we began the evaluation and inventory, which was site-specific research. Reporting was completed in February. Then we've done some iteration and work with the Heritage Resources Committee. I know we discussed this in December, but just by way of review, a little bit about places that matter. On the right side is the provincial framework. So we look at heritage survey as the outside sphere. Places of interest are a little bit more significant. Heritage inventory are significant places, and then the register are protected places. I put it in a funnel. So at the bottom funnel, you can see the register. These are protected, most significant sites. Inventory are significant. COIL, we have interest in. Survey are noted heritage sites. And then we have these 2 other kind of catchment areas of 50 years and 35 years. Could these be heritage? They could be. So they're in that pocket where they're old enough, but they really need some significance around them. In the heritage survey work, we looked at 430 total sites, which include 251 site visits. We discovered that 50 sites had been demolished since the work in 2010. And we added 125 new sites. Places of interest list, which was 109, we uncovered that 15 had been demolished, and we added 21 new sites. This work included 449 photographs. I don't know why I didn't take one more. I should have taken one more. 449 photographs, 270 site forms, spreadsheet, log data, historical research files, which have all been transferred over to the Development Authority. Having such depth of heritage work in Lacombe gives us a chance to really do a deep dive and understand heritage management and heritage loss. So looking at historic survey periods from 1972 to the modern period, first we discovered that there was a loss rate of 41%, which seems a bit stark. It makes you knee-jerk and say 41% is quite large. So we broke it down into more component parts to see where that loss was. So between 72 and 88, our loss rate was about 9%, which is fantastic. Then between 88 and 2009, we spiked to 37%. It's a little rough. Something was going on during that period. But then we recover very nicely to the 19% between 2009 and 2022. So this is really a success story. The national average in Canada is a loss rate of 23%. So most municipalities are losing heritage at a higher rate than Lacombe. So Lacombe is extremely successful in its heritage management. So understanding why Lacombe is successful. Part of it is the length of time that Lacombe has been doing this. So Lacombe is kind of a master in heritage management and has done really well. We did have that spike that is a heavy pressure development period, and that's also at the time that buildings are starting to age out. So we understand why we see that spike in the 30s, and then we leveled out at a 19%, which is really a nice place to be. The heritage inventory, this is where we refine and look and do evaluation of sites. We started with a list of 40, then working with Heritage Resources Committee and staff, we narrowed that down, and we finally landed on 15 sites that we would do an in-depth review on. So we did an in-depth review on 15. Actually, one didn't meet criteria, so we moved that one out and we moved another in. So we actually did kind of an in-depth study on 16. The site list is there. In the Scope 2 report, you'll see the statements of significance that were written for each one. And then the appendix has the statement of integrity, which is a long worksheet that I use to help establish what the statement of significance will be. You'll see a wide variety of different site types and sites. Keep in mind that all of these sites were picked independently. So we were looking at each site as an individual site and not thinking of it as a collective or a cluster, or not thinking about how sites might relate to one another. We were picking them as individual possible significant sites and then dug in and did research around that. That being said, we found some interesting heritage intersections. And I have a series I'm going to talk about there, but first I'll talk a little bit about Adamson House. Adamson House is built by Dorothy and Art Adamson. Dorothy is part of the Horticultural Society, who's connected to the nurseries. She was also a founder of the Historical Society, so really neat connections going on there. The connections I want to talk about here is about a master builder named T.H. Newman, or Bert Newman. Bert Newman built the livestock pavilion, which you see on the left, the building we all know, in 1935. Mr. Newman was previously a farmer, and he relocated to Lacombe during one of the early booms of Lacombe, and he became a master carpenter. He became the go-to builder in town, developed that outstanding building. The next building over, the Peterson residence, he really gets to show his skill as a master builder. So that is just a fantastically built building by T.H. Newman. In between, actually before Livestock Pavilion's built, another farmer moves to town. 1930, another farmer named Alex Ellis moves to town. And he decides, you know, maybe I should learn construction and maybe I should study under this other farmer who became a master carpenter. And so Alex Ellis studies under Bert Newman to become a master builder, and certainly has a hand in building the Livestock Pavilion. It's a little bit harder to tie a link to whether or not he was involved in the Peterson residence, not positive, because by that time, Alex Ellis has started his own Ellis Construction Company by the mid-1940s. But certainly they both worked together to move the Anglican Church to its location at 50th Avenue and Calgary and Edmonton Trail. So they were the two companies that came together that helped move the church to its location. And then Alex Ellis built the hall, which is on the north end of the church. When we picked the IDA pharmacy, we didn't know that it was connected to Alex Ellis, but it was Ellis Construction's workhouse. It was their office building. They constructed it. It's where their workshop was. Everything operated out of that building. And then Alex Ellis built the Wilson's Funeral Home in the mid-1960s. And of course, I think everybody on the inventory list is somehow connected to the Wilson Funeral Home. And I don't mean to make that morbid, but certainly everybody on that inventory list would have been either through there or there attending other funerals. So just an interesting collection of heritage intersections, completely unintended. Another unintended of the sites that we picked, you'll notice if you plot them on a map, their geographic location is very close proximity. So Switzer House, the Watson House, the church, the Peterson House, Wilson's Funeral Home, they're all kind of in a clustered area. So just interesting how that cluster occurred without us trying to create that cluster. So just a really nice heritage pocket. it's stories like these that really give the character defining elements to Lacombe, the sense of place. When I started in heritage work 20 odd years ago, I was young and fresh, and I would categorize myself as a building hugger. I wanted to save every old building I wanted to save. And my friend and mentor, who I really love and appreciate so much, came to me and he said, Michael, sometimes an old building is just an old building. It's all about significance. Is it significant? And it took me a long time to understand that and learn that, 10 years, 15 years, to really understand that not every old building is worth saving, right? It's whether is it significant? What are the character defining elements? What are the stories that it tells? It's those stories that make these places significant and makes them worth saving, or if it doesn't have that, is it worth letting go? The reports came with a series of recommendations and tools, which included comment on the need for further survey and inventory, whether that's in a 5-year or 10-year scope. So let's do this piece of work again so that we can track those metrics over time. Land use bylaw amendments, incentive considerations. We did depth of work on an engagement micro strategy that's been handed over to HRC. And then just how do we continue the success in heritage management? So Lacombe has this great story of heritage managers, and how do we continue that success? And then that bleeds over into the next steps as presented in the staff report, which is to amend the land use bylaw, increase heritage engagement, education awareness, which HRC has already begun, and then review incentives for heritage designation and preservation. Sorry, I should have forwarded the slide. I'm forwarding them here, not there. And that was my whirlwind tour of an outstanding and amazing year of work in Lacombe, and thoroughly gratifying. And I'm open for any questions or corrections that you may have.
Thank you for that presentation. I see there you've got a beaver home there advertised for $4,200. Are you still selling those? Or?
Beaver lumber homes. And look at that building pattern. I would suggest that most certainly we have beaver lumber homes in Lacombe. During the engagement works, a survey respondent did mention that they had a beaver lumber home. But I would also suggest that likely Alex Ellis probably begged, borrowed, or stole the building plans that were part of the beaver lumber packages and built a whole lot of Ellis construction houses using that standard pattern. So we see that one all over Lacombe. And then there's another one called the McLeod, which is a beaver lumber package that you see just all over Lacombe as well.
I was curious with the heritage inventory there, the vast majority of the residences are named after the individuals that live there, but yet on the Lacombe Nurseries one, it's named after the company, Lacombe Nurseries Limited Residence. And I was curious what the reason for that was.
Likely the significance. So that actually, I used the POIL entry. So I just used the naming as it was in POIL and brought that over. But the statement of significance deals with the heritage nursery more than it does the owner. Typically, if it's related to something like that, you would name it after its significant item. There's no real strict rules around how or what we name. Very often you'll see the modern owner listed as the name of the heritage house. It just depends on the depth of research and what path you went through to get to that naming. So, okay. And it's all subject to change. If we wanted to change it to Hutton or to McDonald, that could certainly be changed.
Thank you. Councilor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. My question too had to do with naming. So as I was scrolling through all the documents, so there's lots here. Yeah, I noticed one, like the Cilantro and Chive building is called that, and that's a modern name. Yeah. So I was curious why it was called that rather, and then Wilson's Funeral Chapel is a house now. So why is it still called Wilson's?
You do your best to get back to the origin. So what's the origin story? Because Cilantro and Chive wasn't one that we did depth of research on, I didn't know what the origin story was that. So I'd be making up history. I know now that it's colloquially known as Cilantro and Chive. So that's the name we put on it. Example, I think Puffer Chung is Uglies. So we call that Puffer Chung because somebody has done the bulk work of research to know that that's the Puffer Chung building. If we didn't know that, we would probably call it Uglies.
Right. Okay. May I follow up?
Certainly.
So thank you for the detail in this report, and I think it speaks to your enthusiasm for all of this. And I guess my question's a little bit more over to Manager Hackett, whether this document could somehow be shared with tourism or something. Could a tour of Lacombe be built around this document of those significant sites? Because as I was reading some of those pages, I thought, I don't know, I could imagine there's people around that would just want to do the tour and then read all that information.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Creasy and Councillor Hoekstra. That is some of the discussion that the Heritage Resources Committee has had as well, both with the Historical Society's walking tours and some of their interest in attracting visitors, and then potentially reaching out to the Chamber or other groups that work with the visitor or the business community. We hear in our research on this and in our public outreach how people want to visit Lacombe for its history and for its historic downtown and homes. And certainly in the planning department, sometimes we get phone calls about, my grandparents lived in Lacombe and I think they lived near such and such street. And do you have any historical homes still there? So I think there's great interest in using that and putting it on the website and having that information available for the visitor community. Thank you. And I think our chairman of Heritage Resources Committee, Miles Chikuta, was going to join virtually, but I don't know if he did. So he might, if he's online, he may have something to add to that, but I didn't see if he's online, so. Not
I'm
hearing
not aware
him.
of any individuals online currently.
I can speak to that just briefly. So as a part of the micro strategy, and actually as a part of the engagement, we uncovered what people really like and revere, and walking tours was one of those things that was asked for. So in the micro strategy, we suggested, well, let's build some more robust walking tours and let's do it digitally. Like how do we enhance the digital experience for locals, but also incoming tourists? And HRC has actually been working on an update, a GIS update of the heritage inventory, so folks can go to this. And Miles shared this at the last HRC committee, and it's just mind blowing. Like it's just beyond my comprehension of how they do this, but you go through each site, you see the map, and it was just fantastic. So the work has started in that front, but absolutely this is could be a tourism driver.
Councillor Koenig.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. A couple questions. One of the changes to the amendment to the land use bylaws suggests moving, I'm just relying on POIL itself now. And it might be in here, there's lots going on in this document, and I'll confess I didn't make it through all of it because it's huge, but anyways. So will POIL then, I see you've added some places of interest, obviously, but is it something that you'll do every 5 years, 10 years, or is this it for foreseeable future? Or, because I've obviously done, and you may have addressed that in here, but I can't find it.
I don't recall making a direct recommendation of how often it should be updated, just that it should be updated. And I think it would be updated at the discretion of HRC and the Development Authority. And I also think that elevating places from POIL to the inventory is an important piece as well. So over time, we understand more about the significant places of interest we don't know a lot about. We just know they're interesting. But over time, we may start to learn more about these places, or we may have communities saying these places are of high value. So then we probably want to elevate those. So I would suggest a 5-year scope is really doable. There are granting streams available. This was done under a provincial grant, so there are granting streams to help offset that. But I think 5 years is probably a good update. This last one was 10 years. Is that a little too long? I don't know. We only had 19% loss in that time, which is fantastic. So even flexing to that 10-year scope could fit as well.
Okay, thank you. No, because I was, like you say, you're changing the focus from 50 years plus to the POIL, so I want to just make sure you don't lose anything in the mix, right?
And actually, my recommendation goes a little bit further than that. And I'll let HRC come to you with their own ideas. But my idea is that POIL rests with the Development Authority, that we're not getting HRC involved at that level. Management really occurs at the inventory level. And this is more kind of industry standard. This is Alberta standard. So it's the inventoried sites that we begin to manage and begin to worry about, because these ones we know are significant and we have a body of research to back that up. Oil sites, we don't know. We don't know if they're significant. We don't have a body of research to back that up. So I think those ones go to Development Authority to uncover, is there value here? And then inventory sites go to HRC for kind of that adjudication that then comes for decision makers.
Thank you. If I have one more, Mayor Creasy.
Certainly.
You also recommend removing requirements for owners to salvage specific heritage items on their property prior to demolition. Is that just because you have too much, or it's just you're not getting good value there anymore, or what's?
Mayor Creasy and Council, that's I guess a desire to work cooperatively with the building owners. It's certainly not that we have too much salvaged items. I think they've been very successful with the Heritage Resource Committee being able to sell items that owners have donated, either to help with other people's renos or antique collectors, this kind of thing. But it's just the wording in the bylaw makes it a requirement. You shall allow us to salvage. And we really want to work cooperatively with building owners. If the building has come to the end of the life and there is some items in there that rather than go to the landfill, people would be willing to donate, then let's make that a more collaborative approach. And if they want to sell it themselves, they do own it. So, you know, if we want to let that happen, that keeps it out of the waste stream as well and keeps it in the heritage community. So that's really the intent there, is to just move with a different approach, I guess. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate the presentation. That final report, I think I may have mistakenly identified that as the request for decision, item 6.1, but that was really 4.2. So while we've got you seated here, Manager Hackett, let's move into the request for decision for the Heritage Survey Inventory and POIL update, as you have outlined after the report.
Yes, thank you very much. And they do tie together very well, of course. So thank you, Mayor Creasy. And in follow-up to Mr. Doherty's comprehensive presentation, it's my pleasure to request that Council endorse the Heritage Survey and Inventory Update Project Scope 1 and 2 reports, including an updated places of interest list. Recommendations from the report, and Council started to touch on those already, involve a series of next steps, which are to amend the land use bylaw, to both streamline and enhance the heritage portions of the bylaw, primarily moving away from a focus on all the buildings over 50 years old, which I hesitate to say is really old, but buildings over 50, instead to concentrate on buildings that are of the most historic interest, as voiced by the community. These would be buildings on the POIL and on the inventory. Certainly the details of the bylaw amendment will come forward at a future meeting, and would follow all of the formal bylaw amendment processes. But it is important to note that the city right now has hundreds and hundreds of buildings over 50 years old. And if this report is accepted by Council, we would begin to move just to about 111 that are on the POIL, or even a more refined group that would be on the inventory, to really concentrate on our protection and working with those owners. What is also new for Lacombe is recognition that in some places in Lacombe we have heritage landscapes or cultural areas that the public has identified as having a historical identity. That is important to Lacombe. So the report does talk about the overall identity and atmosphere of the LMC grounds, of downtown, of the Berman University campus, and of 50th Avenue. And so how to approach and celebrate those areas, it is still something we're exploring to celebrate the identity, but it's certainly not to be more restrictive in that area, but to really recognize that those places, not just a building, but those places have contributed to Lacombe's identity. In addition to amending the land use bylaw, the reports before you tonight also recommend methods and ideas for enhanced education and community outreach. And the reports also have some recommendations for additional incentives for heritage designations and increased preservation in the city, which can be reviewed in the future. These reports build on the input from the community and have full endorsement of the Heritage Resources Committee. The chairman, Mr. Chakuda, was going to virtually attend tonight. I'm sure something unfortunately came up. He wasn't able to be here. But the vice chair, Mr. Peter Bausma, is here in chambers. So I thank them both and the HRC for their work and support on this project. And tonight, administration recommends that council endorse the Heritage Survey and Inventory Update Project and its broad recommendations as described. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a council member that is so inclined to make a motion. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I would be honored to make this motion as somebody who actually does live in the Heritage House. I move that council endorse the Heritage Survey and Inventory Update Project recommendations to amend the city's bylaw land use bylaw to streamline and enhance the heritage portions of the land use bylaw, enhance public education and community outreach programs by the Heritage Resource Committee, and review incentives for heritage designation and preservation.
Does anyone have any additional concerns or questions? Seeing none, I will call the question then. Please go ahead and vote. All those votes are in, and that is unanimously in favor. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Mr. Doherty, just because this contract is, I assume, is pretty much concluded, doesn't mean that you can't stop by and visit us once in a while, you know.
And thank you all. I mean, the problem is that you're prepared. You know, I literally have worked for the values. I mean, well, that's fantastic.
Thank you. Appreciate the kind words. Okay, moving on under request for decision, Senior Manager McKinnon for the 2023 Q1 financial report, please.
Good evening, Mayor Creasy and Council. Tonight I'm here to present the Q1 variance report for 2023. The timeline of the report is from January 1st to March 31st, 2023. Overall, revenues in this time period are $84,000 lower than budget. Franchise fees are higher by $104,000, mostly due to consumption being higher in the winter months. Goods and services are under budget by $271,000. Utility fees for water and wastewater tend to be lower in the winter months. Interest and penalties are $79,000 higher than budget. $40,000 of this is due to penalties on property taxes that were higher than the year-to-date budget. Local agencies and other sources are under budget by approximately $38,000 due to timing differences. Permits, fines, and licenses are under budget by $126,000. $87,000 of this is due to timing of business license fee collection, and $30,000 of this is due to shortfall in the collection of police fines. Overall, expenses are $117,000 over budget. Debt and banking charges are over budget by $550,000 due to an entry that will reverse in April. Funding to others is under budget by $94,000 due to water and wastewater services. Goods and services is $452,000 or 21% under budget for the first quarter, but we expect this to decrease as the year progresses. Requisitions are over budget due to $87,000, but we will adjust the budget in April when the tax rate bylaw was approved and adjustments were made for 2023. The net year-to-date deficit is $201,000, largely due to timing differences for revenue and debt expense. We are not projecting a deficit at the year end. The next variance report for January to June 2023 will be presented in August, and I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Mayor Creasy, a lot relates to the timing of professional services. So the first quarter is January to March. A lot of those expenses just have not occurred yet for the year. They're budgeted and prorated throughout the whole year, but the timing of the expenditures will just happen later in the year.
Right, I appreciate that. That's a lot of professional services.
Are you talking the expenditure side of goods and services or the revenue side of goods and services?
Just that they're 450,000 under budget. So what?
So on that item in specific, there was telephone charges that were under budget by 26,000, travel and training under budget by 10,000. Subscriptions in publications, just basically timing, were under budget by 37,000. Other professional services or contracted services were under budget by 191,000. And that's often just based on when we make those payments. Sometimes they're contracts that we don't pay in the first quarter with the timing differences.
Right.
Building and equipment is under budget by 73,000. Ice and snow removal, which is more a winter expenditure, is under budget by 44,000 for the first quarter of the year. And all the other expenses add up to 72,000. So the goods and services is a big category of expenditures that covers so many different things. It's not one particular item that's causing that. It's just the timing of the expenses overall.
Forgive me, I've been on a lengthy holiday. I'm thinking goods and services tax. And we're $450,000 difference of 5%. I'm thinking, this is really great. You went over enough here that explains about this much percentage. Forgive me.
Okay.
Goods and services overall. That makes far better sense. Anyone else? I think Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I would so move that council accepts the Q1 2023 financial report as information.
Appreciate that. Anything additional? Please go ahead and vote. Once that's accepted here unanimously, thank you. Item 6.3 from Director Lapointe concerning public engagement enhancements.
Good evening, Mayor Creasy and Council. Tonight, administration is presenting several public engagement enhancements for Council's consideration. As you recall, Council recently discussed improvements to the Coffee with Council format at your April 3rd Committee of the Whole meeting. Administration built a list of opportunities presented this evening based on the feedback received from that discussion. Administration also realized that the changes listed were beyond simply the Coffee with Council format change and involved broader public engagement plan impact. As a result, these options are presented as public engagement enhancements rather than Coffee with Council amendments. So if you refer to the list, there is the live streamed fireside lounge chats. These would be topic-based with council members on hand to field questions. Council members would receive briefing notes like those produced for trade shows or markets before the live stream session so you can prepare in advance. And this format would allow for real-time questions from citizens. We identified local significant events. This opportunity piggybacks on traffic building community events, and you heard me speak about that last time. That's important to piggyback on events that are driving traffic or attracting attention to perhaps topics of interest from council side of things. So venues and events would be could be selected to match the focus of the discussion. We did talk a little bit about Coffee with Council itself and what's been working, especially at the trade show, that should consider limiting attendance to the Chamber of Commerce. You actually did limit attendance to the Chamber of Commerce Spring Trade Show and Fall Active Living Fair. You mentioned last time they didn't want to really attend the spring session of the Active Living Fair, so that's what's being suggested this evening. And you wanted to utilize a format where there isn't one Coffee with Council period during the event. Instead, Coffee with Council members and senior administration would share scheduling times throughout the entirety of the event. There's a suggestion for grocery store pop-ups where council members would provide carryout service and share city-branded reusable bags with residents. And the thought was there'd be an opportunity for impromptu discussion. If residents weren't keen to share information on the spot, you could provide business cards to provide the resident with some time to follow up with their feedback. And finally, we suggested a pancake breakfast with the potential to partner with a local nonprofit agency to stage the event at one of Lacomb's premier events, like Light Up the Night or Lacombe Days. Again, this connects council to a more informal traffic building opportunity, and the administration and agency would handle the event logistics, with the partner perhaps receiving an honorarium for their efforts. Council would serve the food and refreshments, and marketing materials would be created and shared informally on site, with council and administration available for discussion. The administration recommends that whatever changes, if any, are desired by council, that those would take effect in 2024. With that, I'm open to any questions you may have or suggestions.
So council's had a few days to review some of the ideas put forward here. Are there any that you do not feel would be either successful or in our best interest to pursue? I think overall, some great ideas, but I expect there'll be some that perhaps won't quite meet expectations. So that might be an easier way to go. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm just wondering about I like all of the ideas actually, but the fireside chat, I'm just wondering how well that would be received. I don't know what our numbers are to watch council. I think pretty low. So I don't know if that would be our best way of getting through to the public. But I mean, certainly we could live stream something in an event, possibly. Might be a better way to do that. Than I don't know how many people would tune in to watch Grant sit in front of a fire. So who knows?
I think there might be at least two, but yeah, I don't know if there's members of the public that are there as well and it's topic based. I think it's worth a try. I don't think any of these are guaranteed winners, but certainly be willing to give that one a go. I guess for me, the one that I struggled with was the grocery store one. Because if you think I'm packing people's groceries out to their car, you're kidding yourself. I don't even like doing my own, but I just not giving city branded garbage bags to individuals who have already paid for them. I don't know will be appreciated as much as we may think. That would be my one that I'm not particularly enamored with, but the rest I think sound great. I think a pancake breakfast is always fun and a great way to interact in a positive environment. I like paring back the coffee with council session to do would be an appropriate move in my opinion. And the one that Councillor Gullickson outlined, I too have some doubts, but I'm certainly willing to give it a try along with some other willing participants there and see where it leads. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, just for feedback. While I love option one, that would be fantastic if people would be just, clamoring to log on. I just feel like that probably won't be the case. Though I feel like that option could be sort of explored a little bit more as to how you could make it work. For example, some partnerships, like maybe it's members of council and FCSS, and we're talking about something to do with our community that people will be interested in. Maybe it's an interview process. Maybe one of us as a councillor is interviewing, an organization representative, and just some back and forth. And so it's conversation, but it's also an interview, and then it's information for residents. So just something like that. I'm not saying that's the answer, but just maybe, I don't know. I don't think that one's completely off the table, other than I just don't like that exact iteration. 2, I like. 3, I like the tweak to it that addresses some of the problem that I've had with that in the past. I probably share the same Number 4, I just don't, while I have no problem packing out somebody's groceries if they need a hand or something, I just don't feel like that gives us an ample opportunity to actually engage, which is really the whole point. And so I'd rather see us do some sort of other activity. And I love option 5. I think that could be really fun. Having spent a few years in Calgary once upon a time, you know, the Calgary Stampede pancake breakfasts are a hoot. And I was lucky to work for an employer that hosted one. And boy, were those fantastic events to be part of. So yeah, something like that would be really fun, I think, as a counselor, and would be really neat for the community. So yeah, thank you.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I would echo the sentiments around number 1. I don't know how many people would tune in, but maybe there's something, an opportunity to tweak that. I'm just looking for clarification. I don't mind all the other ones, just on the grocery one. I totally agree. I don't, like I drop the eggs kind of thing. I don't think we should provide grocery store carryout services. I was just more like thinking just 2 counselors standing away from the doors, and then if anyone wants to approach us, great. If not, so be it. I didn't understand your reference to the grocery bags. We shouldn't hand them out, or could hand them out?
I think when people appreciate that they've paid for the bags, I don't know that handing them out is going to be, I just don't see that as being positive myself.
Okay, I kind of like my little Lacombe bag. I mean, if someone's going to give me another one, great. I don't know. Anyways, so I think all have potential to be tweaked or looked at, except, I don't know, everyone knows my views on social media, so I don't know if one is my favorite. Anyways.
Councillor Dallas?
Thank you. Thank you for all these options. I think, kind of we highlighted last time that we need to meet people where they are. Option 1, it terrifies me, but I'm certainly be willing to try and go for it. Option 2 and option 3 to me kind of seem very, option 2 and option 4 very similar, and that is just meeting people out in the community, and I think that would be great. Option 2 certainly support and would really enjoy being a part of. Option 3, I support those. Option 4, again, I'm just worried that maybe it escalates and we wind up like shoveling gravel for a landscape company next, and that's hard. So that one, I think, I would be less inclined to do that just based on my own personal grocery shopping preferences, but I think maybe other people would have interest in that in the community. And option 5, I think that would be enjoyable to be a part of, as long as we weren't just there standing and smiling and flipping pancakes and nobody actually has an opportunity to speak to us. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other preferences? How about for Mr. Fireside Chat Gullickson?
Well, I would like to do that, but that's okay. No, option 3, I'm sorry, not option 3, option 4. We do a, donation to the food bank, food drive for Rotary does that every year at the grocery stores, and it's, fairly successful. Could we do that as councillors, set up out front, say, okay, make donations to the food bank and present it as a dual purpose event instead of just us sitting there with our smiley faces?
I don't see why not. We wouldn't be involving bags in that situation, or perhaps you would be, but you could bag the donations at that point if you'd like to at that.
Absolutely. Yeah, give a bag and bring a donation back. So no, there's opportunities there, I think, to do something like that, and I think that would be a positive. I certainly don't want to carry groceries.
So just out of curiosity, were any of these options brought forward by members of the public?
No, they were created by administration based on feedback from the last session.
And which is fine, and that was the answer I was expecting, because I genuinely did not know. But I just want to point out one thing, that it puts us in a pretty good light to think that we have to come up with creative ways to interact with the public. That's a very positive thing. I think the single most positive thing that we do is have the open forum before us as an option, and council as a whole does a pretty good job of interacting with the public on a one-to-one basis continually. Because myself, I don't hear a lot of complaints from, let me rephrase that. I get input from a lot of people. I don't hear from a lot of people that suggest they don't have an avenue to speak with any member of council, myself included. So that's a very good thing. And the fact that we're going about this and making this commitment to enhance it even more, even when we don't have a real burning need to, I think speaks pretty highly of the entire team. So thank you for putting them forward. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I feel like I have to weigh in a little bit, but truly I echo a lot what people are saying. My only concern is the perceived preference towards a grocery store, a perceived preference towards a not-for-profit, a perceived preference towards a type of social services. Are we endorsing the food bank? I don't know. That would be my only concern, that in our efforts to connect with people, we're going to be doing that. And I guess I would suggest we need to be careful about that. Whereas being at a Generals game or something like that, I don't think we're demonstrating any preference. So is there a way to do this without someone walking away and thinking, why didn't I get picked to be partnering with the city on that?
I do just want to comment that this evening was intended to be more of a discussion. We, of course, want some direction, but we weren't anticipating seeing all 5 options supported. We understand that council's time is at a premium as well. And so certainly, if you want to pare down the list, we're certainly open to that.
It's a hint of disparity there. Please reduce that list. I think I heard there. Where do we want to start? See, your options obviously were too good. And one of them for the reduction in coffee with council. Okay, that's fair enough. That isn't a big deal. So basically that leaves 1, 2, 4, and 5. I heard from everybody a positive response on the council pancake breakfast. I'm assuming that would be during the Lacombe days. Does the North Business Group still do the one in Canada Day? We don't want to be interfering with that event. So
we had suggested a couple of different possibilities there, Lacombe Days, Canada Day, or the Culture and Harvest Festival, but we did want to connect with the organizing bodies of those groups. That's why we'd suggested the 2024 to make sure that they can accommodate us and are interested in actually doing that.
a bunch of lights on here. Who was first? Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would recommend we get rid of option 1. I don't like that one. I do like the idea of maybe showing up, well, the farmers markets, I love them, you know that. And certainly Generals games and different high profile events. I like that one. Number 3, I like that going down to just 2. And grocery stores, I wouldn't want to carry groceries, but setting up out front with something else, I'd be okay with that. And the pancake breakfast I like, but if we were going to get rid of another one, I would say the grocery store one would be the one.
So we're going to scratch option 4 off the list. Here's a good start. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Christy. Yeah, I was just going to say 3 and 5 would be the one I would go to try for 2024.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I would speak in favor of 2, 3, and 5, but a suggestion that perhaps rather than having the trade show and the active living fair, the fall active living fair, I would just make it 1. So you'd have 1 event in April, 1 event in July, and then pick a time in the fall, winter, do a Generals game, for example. That sort of spreads it out, and you've kind of changed up what we're doing.
Is that reduction in scope or to your liking? Director Lapointe, does that seem reasonable?
Absolutely. Would we like a motion that basically indicates the options? I know that the motion is there where you can actually say options 1, 3, and 4.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I move that council directs administration to proceed with implementing public engagement options 2, 3, and 5 in 2024.
And do we want to give IT time for that, or is a simple show of hands suffice in this case? Or keep the pressure on? Go ahead and vote, please. Huh.
Try it again.
There. There we go. And that is in favor unanimously. So thanks, everyone. And I'm pleased to see the next item here from Director Thompson for the 50th Avenue slope repairs. On my return to Lacombe the other night, I noticed an awful lot of pylons and whatnot on Highway 12 or 50th Avenue, as it is referred to. So let's go through that item now, please.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So today we're advising council, if you aren't aware already, of an urgent but a manageable situation on the south slope of 50th Avenue on the west side of Lacombe. Last week, one of our staff members had noticed that a good portion of the slope directly above one of the catch basins, the drainage catch basins on Highway 12 or 50th Avenue, had sunk and kind of sloughed down the slope. And so upon further investigation, we discovered that in addition to that first catch basin being sloughed and the slope being significantly eroded down the slope, there's actually a second one just west of that location that is starting to do the same thing. And so we staff acted quickly, closed the lane, made the area safe. We've diverted water. They've diverted water from the worst catch basin to the other one to prevent further erosion. They have since put the sewer camera down both catch basins. The pipe that leads from the catch basins down to the very bottom of the slope, there's a continuous corrugated steel pipe that goes from the road all the way down to the bottom of the hill that was buried. And over time, we discovered that the whole bottom of that pipe is completely rusted through. And so that means every time it rains, every storm, that water was completely leaving the pipe right at the top, following the ground below the pipe, and then washing out over time below that corrugated steel pipe. And so it just happens to be this spring was the time that the worst one had collapsed, and that sloughing has occurred. And so we had this did happen on the north side of Highway 12 in 2016. The repair there was done to armor the embankment and to change the pipe material to a plastic pipe material that would last much longer and to strengthen the slope from drainage. We anticipate something similar occurring on the south side of the slope at these two locations in terms of repair methodology. However, on the one slope, on the one washout that is just starting, we have cambered it. It's the pipe. While the pipe bottom is rusted out, the actual pipe is still has some integrity left. So there may be an opportunity to reline it or look at more cost-effective options to give it a full life again. If we can also fill in the material underneath the pipe somehow with some kind of fill material, injecting a fillcrete or something like that, that would provide the support for that pipe. And so based on the historical cost on the north side slope repair that we did in 2016, we are asking for council's authorization tonight for up to $350,000 to conduct these repairs. I view this as a conservative estimate, more of a, if we have to do a full removal and replacement of those two culverts down the slope. So we are still pursuing other more cost-effective options, but for the purposes of us being able to explore all options and to I guess act quickly and being able to repair these situations this year. This would be an unbudgeted expense. So we're here before council tonight to request authorization to spend $350,000 to proceed with those repairs. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So where do we get $350,000? Just ask.
Yeah, Councillor Hoekstra, we are proposing to fund that from the roads reserve.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Through to Manager Thompson. I'm surprised that it took so long for us to find this. It looks like it's been quite a while that it's been washing out, especially that one. That's my only comment. It seems like we should have been on this sooner, but I feel that we have little choice but to fund this and get it fixed right away before it becomes more serious.
Councillor Dallas.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I agree. I guess we I don't see a better option. So I make the motion that council authorizes up to $350,000 from the roads reserve to repair the south side of the 50th Avenue slope between 63rd Street and 76th Street.
Anything additional before we give direction? Chomping on the bit to vote, or you want to say something, Councillor Connick? Very good. Go ahead and vote, please. Be nice to see when we have this fix come back way under budget. And that is decided by unanimous in favor vote. Thank you. Section 7, notices of motion. Councillor Dallas.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I submitted this notice of motion that council direct administration to develop a plan that provides public facing on-site signage for capital budget projects, excluding equipment over $300,000 with a funding breakdown displayed.
And so just so I'm clear, was this notice of motion brought forward last meeting, or this is the notice of motion? Very good. Thank you. In the interest of clarity, Chief Gowdy, in the past, we have had some of this type of thing for some projects and whatnot. Is there a current procedure that have followed, or has it been on an ad hoc basis?
I would say even less than ad hoc. It has been when there is a requirement to do so from other funding partners. So traditionally, provincial grants, federal grants will often have obligations to acknowledge their contribution to the project on site and any printed materials. So that's probably where you would have seen previous things of this nature. It isn't something that we have done in the past and probably could do a better job of showing people, well, this is where your tax dollars are going. We were talking about this right before and saying, well, even CNE Trail where we have the paving tax sign up, which got up there fairly quickly. Really, that represents 150 of the $4 million project, and communicating that to people that this is a $4 million repaving job, I think does demonstrate the scale of some of the infrastructure costs we're dealing with.
Thank you. So the last items we have, there's 4 in-camera items, so I'll just read out the meetings. So everyone's got those for their calendars, and people that are watching it from home are aware. All are here in council chambers at 5:30 p.m. The first one is a committee of the whole meeting on June 5th. The remaining 2 are regular council meetings, one on June 12th, and then again on June 10th. So please add those. And I think that concludes our public business this evening, unless I have glossed over any items. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll make the motion to move into camera.
Thank you. So made at 7:30 p.m. Please go ahead and vote now. So just so IT is aware, I have pushed my button in the last couple of votes and I was registered, and I'm getting a lock sign on there now. So whatever that is, just so I don't forget to mention it after the meeting. But that is passed in favor unanimously. Thank you. So we're now in camera. Let's take a short recess. It's been a couple hours. 7:30. Let's reconvene at 7:40.